Greetings Earthlings and welcome to Planet Sync. In each episode we invite a musician from planet Earth. Our intention is to gain information about the world of sync, as we are setting up our own advertising agency. This week's guest is...
Hi, this is Mo Foster. I'm a bass player and an author, and as a musician I've toured or played in the studio with people like Jeff Beck and Phil Collins and Jerry Rafferty, Gil Evans, and quite a few more.
Thanks Mo for joining us here in space. So, we asked you to bring a few of your favorite things. What book is that?
Favorite book? Very hard to think of one. One obvious one is my own book, of course, which is British Rock Guitar, which I had published about 6 years ago. And it's just a wonderful set of stories from musicians, because we're silly people. And it's available from all good bookstores right now. Regarding other authors' books, one book that knocked me out, I read this at an airport once, it's a book called Harpo Speaks. It's Harpo Marx, his autobiography. It's absolutely charming. I was always a fan of the Marx brothers, and he was one who never spoke, and to hear his tales was just a treat. And another book that I love is called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. And it's a biography by Richard Feynman, the eminent physicist who was part of the Los Alamos project. And he's a nutter. He loved playing bongos in street parades, cracking safes. It's wonderful to hear or read about that side of physics.
What gadget is that?
Gadgets. Creaky chair. That's not the gadget. A couple spring to mind, both inspired by myself. One was when I started playing seriously on bass guitar. At first I played just with a plectrum. Then I noticed that all the good guys were playing with their fingers, so I wanted to learn this technique, but it hurts. The tips of the fingers really hurt as you practice. And I wanted to practice away from the instrument, so I built this little device that was just a 6-inch piece of wood and a bridge made out of a jack plug and one old string and a tuning peg, and it's effectively one string, a bass guitar with one string, and I could pluck it with it sitting in my pocket, and it worked. It helped develop the calluses, but somebody pointed out they could see this movement inside my pocket. It looked like I was enjoying myself a bit too much, but it worked. The other device was this needs a bit of explaining. Back in the 70s, there was a thing set up by the Musicians Union called doubling, which meant if you took along two instruments like guitar and mandolin, you got paid 25% extra of your fee if you played both of them. And the guitar players were doing well out of this, especially when the pedals came in. They could use fuzzbox and wah-wah, and that too was called doubling. But the bass players were having none of this, so I invented a pedal that actually had nothing in it. It just a switch, and which wasn't connected to anything, and the jack plug went straight in and out again. And I used to try producers who were idiots, and say, "Do you fancy a bit of this?" and play differently, switch it on, and they'd like the sound. And I say, "Sure." So I used to charge for this, and we ended up calling it a DFA pedal, which perhaps needs no explaining. And it's on a lot of albums. I've had a Mark II made, which has LEDs that show you when it's not doing anything. I met the wonderful bassist Leland Sklar at an exhibition, and we discussed these tricks, and he used to have a producer switch on his bass for the same reason. He would just flick it and charge for it. But his new bass, he has a signature bass made by Warwick. It's rather lovely, and it's got a rotary switch on it with 6 settings, and the first 5 are just nothing at all. They don't do anything. But the 6th one lights up in the LED of a finger pointing outwards, which is his signature gesture. I think it's lovely, and again, he probably charges for it.
DFA, I will have to look up its meaning, Mo. So here is the result. Department of Foreign Affairs. Sorry, I have had a minor malfunction. My search engine is on the blink. What is your favorite drink?
Favorite drink? I think now for me it's coffee. because now we have such wonderful coffees available, things like lattes and Americanos, and it was just better than just white or black. And it's drinkable. And the coffee bar society has arrived in England. It's like having a little bit of the Mediterranean around. And that's only in the last 6-7 years. It's fantastic.
Back in the day, did the drink ever get you in trouble?
Oh, I bet it has done a few times, I'm sure. Because I've stopped drinking now. But let me think. Back in '82, I was touring in America with Phil Collins. And we did mostly one show per night, but sometimes we did a double show, which I'm not very good at, because you do the energy of the first show, then you wait half an hour and do it all over again. And we played a club called, I think it was the Rainbow on Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. And in the gap, because it's Los Angeles, there are lots of musicians wandering around, and I met John Entwistle, who I'd never met before. And we started chatting, and I discovered I was synchronising drinks with him, and he drinks brandy. And I'm enjoying chatting, and suddenly remembered I've got to go back on stage. Oh man, it was hard. I tried very hard to pretend to be sober, but the fingers don't obey you. And Phil noticed. It was embarrassing, but that was the one occasion.
What's your favourite band t-shirt, Mo?
The band t-shirt. I think the only ones I ever packed really were t-shirts I'd been given for tours I was on, like with Jeff or Phil or somebody. But probably my favourite t-shirt is from my own school band, the Tradewinds. We did a reunion gig about 10 years ago in my village in Staffordshire, and it was remarkable to get these old friends together. We weren't very good, but it was great fun.
Do you have any bizarre stories about band merchandise whilst on the road?
We were on tour in Australia with Cliff Richard, and this is in the late 70s. And sometimes when you fly from each town to the next town, you don't see where you are. There's such big distances. And sometimes we rented a car and travelled along the coast. And the road crew rented a vehicle one time and travelled inland a bit, such that they did actually see and unfortunately banged into a kangaroo and knocked it out. And they were very worried by this, got out and felt sorry for it. And then, being road crew, they went and fetched a silk tour jacket with Cliff Richard written on the back, lifted the kangaroo up and put his arms through it and zipped up the front and started posing with it wrapped around their shoulders, you know. And then the poor thing woke up and hopped off. So somewhere in Australia there's a kangaroo with this bloody Cliff Richard jacket on.
Do you have any stories from the Cliff Richard tours?
Cliff was playing at some kind of special concert. I can't remember what it was. Cliff Richard this is. And there was an orchestra and a choir, and they were performing the song Country Roads, the John Denver song. And it started with a rather lovely a cappella intro, 4 voices, or not 4, many voices, singing Country Roads. And Harry Rabinowitz was the conductor, and they'd arrived at a system whereby the pianist would play a note for pitch, so that the singers would not know what note to come in on, and then he would do he would conduct 1-2, so they would come in. They'd come in on beat 3. And on the night, he lifts the baton, comes down, and as he's coming down, he realises that Cliff hasn't seen this introduction, and very quickly cuts with his sideways gesture of the baton, cuts the song from starting. Unfortunately, one of the choir hadn't seen the cut, so you hear the note from the piano, the movement from Harry Rabinowitz, and the solitary voice going, "Cunt."
What is the best TV commercial ever?
Right, favourite adverts. I really can't stand most adverts. They just insult me, but I do remember playing on a couple of enjoyable ones. One was, I think I played on the very first Cadbury Flake advert, written by Chris Gunning. That was a good one. And also, way back in the late 60s, Linda Hoyle, the singer of the band, Affinity, and me and Mike Jopp, another guitar player, we were hired to go to Olympic Studios in Barnes for this advert for shredded wheat. And I remember the lyric. It was, "There are 2 men in my life, and I give them both the best, with natural shredded wheat." There you go. And Mike and I earned about £9 each, and Linda earned several thousand.
What's the favorite album you played on and produced? For the record, I love the Frida album you played on.
Favourite album? I've just produced an album for Linda Hoyle, who was the singer in my first band. And it's her second solo album in 44 years, which is, I think, a bit of a record. It is a record. And I think it's I love it. It's one of the best things I've ever done, and I play it a lot, which is not what you often do with things you've made.
What is the name of that album?
Linda's album was called The Fetch.
Fantastic album, The Fetch. I love the album cover. Who designed that?
One of our old friends from our early days at Ronnie Scott's Club, that is, was Roger Dean, who went on to design some fabulous LP covers for bands like Yes. And we knew him because he was helping to make the furniture at Ronnie's. He was a furniture designer. So we rang him up, and he did the cover for us, which is wonderful. It's a Roger Dean cover, which is fantastic. And it got released as a CD. And then, to our great pleasure, a Norwegian label called Panther asked if they could release it as a double LP. Vinyl, of course. And it's out, and there's that lovely cover spread right out like it used to. That was a treat.
In the 70s, did the top session players of the day play on jingles and adverts?
In the 70s, if the people who'd written them and the companies who wanted to make them wanted the best players, they were hard to get because the guys were booked out 3 sessions a day, sometimes 4. So they created a new jingle session called the Greedy Hour, and it ran from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. And you had to be really desperate to want to do that. And everybody did. So you went to bed exhausted at 11 or midnight and got up at 6 or 7. It was insane. That's advertising.
What's your favourite albums?
Albums in the past I've enjoyed. There are so many. I'll just pick a couple at random. One, of course, was The Shadows, their first LP. A lot of people now don't know who the band is, but they were part of my formative development. And the sound of the Fender Strat on it is stunning, and the Fender Precision Bass. And probably something like the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, with my old pal Carol Kay on bass. That's stunning. And then Miles Davis and Gil Evans albums like Sketches of Spain. There are too many. Soundtrack. I don't watch films for the soundtrack, really. I remember when I was much younger seeing films like South Pacific and being very impressed by the songs, which are written by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein.
South Pacific, a good one, Mo. Can you share some memories of soundtracks you have played on?
I've played on a few films on the soundtracks, in the underscore with the big orchestra. That was a treat to turn up to a studio in London and see 100 musicians set up. And on the screen up comes Bond. That's lovely. I did Octopussy and For Your Eyes Only. And also the real treat was a Pink Panther film. I think it was The Revenge of.
I love that Pink Panther. Let me sing you the theme. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. Tricky one that I must get a new singing app installed. What's your favourite TV theme?
One theme was a surprise. I played on an album for Dennis Waterman, who's an actor, and I didn't realise he was a singer. But we turned up and he sang very well. We did a whole album. And one of the tracks on it, called I Should Be So Good For You, was taken by a film company and became the theme of Minder, this TV series that's still running today. And it was fun for me because the part was written very simply and it wasn't very interesting. And I happened to have a bass with me that made a rather fine noise, a Kramer. I ended up doing a slapping part. And that's the theme you hear today. It was great fun.
Your friend and fellow bass player Carol Kay played on a few themes. Do you have any favourites?
Carol Kay, she played on things like Mission Impossible and Ironside and all these terrific TV themes from America.
Can you share the story about the TV show Countdown's theme?
Brian Bennett was asked to play timpani on a track for composer Alan Hawkshaw. He'd been asked to write the theme for Countdown. It's a wonderful
nice little
word program. And it was done at Alan's house in Radlett. The studio was the top of the house, and Brian couldn't get the timpani up the stairs. It was too cramped. So they dropped microphones down and headphones, and he set it up on a landing near to where Alan's dog was asleep. And it came at the end of the piece. It goes da 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 da, and there's a big boing on the timpani. She bends at the pedal, which woke up the dog, who came over and savaged the shit out of Brian's leg. So you can hear that theme of the dog growling at the end. It's fantastic.
Do you have any other dog stories, Mo?
Oh, dog stories. Well, yes. In '82, I did an album for Ringo Starr at his house in Ascot. It was called Tittenhurst Park, the studio. And it was very friendly, lovely event. Joe Walsh was producing. Gary Brooker was on keyboards, the guy from Procol Harum. Chris Stainton was on. And we did a week. It was very friendly, and we took some time off. And I went back again. I should point out that during that week I'd got to know his Alsatian and thought I was friends with it. He was a dog that was a little confused because he didn't know whether it was a guard dog or a pet. There's the beginnings of a psychopath there, I think. And we went back, and I arrived early and went for a walk in the park. It was sunny and I had my instrument on. I was just practising walking around. It was very nice. And I was aware that Barbara Bach, Ringo's wife, had turned up on this slope behind, and her daughter and this dog, and I waved, and suddenly it ran towards me. I thought he was going to come and lick my knee or something. No, the jaws were there and the drool was pouring out, and it was this nutter was coming towards me. I turned around, raised my hands in the air, fearing the worst, and screamed at Barbara, "Get this fucking thing off!" And he actually did leap up and bite me on the bum. I've got a shirt with the holes in it. And I remember thinking, this is not how you normally talk to an ex-Bond girl, is it? The wife of the artist. I was taken immediately to hospital for a tetanus jab. And I spoke a bit later on to the guy who was then the studio manager, Mike O'Donnell. He said, I wasn't the only one. There's a list of people this dog did this to. And it said it got so bad they were thinking of opening an account at the hospital.
Ringo clearly did not give him enough peace and love. Do you have any questions?
Hello, Moondog.
Hello, Mo.
What's the music like on your planet?
The music on Planet Sync is just great. We have developed a body snatching system which involves taking all the dead bodies of the great musicians from planet Earth. We bring them back to life and make them space compatible. Last year was a good year. We got Prince and David Bowie, who are now settling in very nicely. In fact, they have now formed a duo, going by the name of Camp David and the Revolution. A lot of the greats are doing very well. For instance, Hendrix, who is back with The Experience, is on his 890th album. He's knocking them out.
Does anyone get paid?
Oh yes indeed, Mo. Musicians are awarded very well up here on Planet Sync, and best of all, drummers are paid the most as they have to carry the most gear and are first in on the gig and last to leave. It's all down the gravity tax.
Well, thanks Moondog for having me. It's been a great pleasure. And can I have my trousers back now, please?
Thanks you very much, Mo, for being a fantastic guest. Your story's arty-spitting funny. I must dash as I have to take my saber dog Maximilian to a training school. It's run by a very stern lady called Babs Woodhouse, who runs a tight ship and shouts walkies rather a lot, much to Maximilian's dislike. My concern is Maximilian is going the same way as Ringo's K9.